Thank you.
So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Today is the first death anniversary of Girish Karnad. The session is named Remembering Girish Karnad, and the lecture would be delivered by Dr. Zindagi Kumari with special reference to Karnad's play Nagamandal. Now, before we start, we move on to Dr. Zindagi's lecture. I would like to read out her brief bio note so you know a bit about, you can't know everything about her because she has a broad range of work to her credit. So, a bit about Dr. Zindagi Kumari. Dr. Zindagi is an assistant professor at Maharaja Surajmal Institute of Technology, New Delhi, which is affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University, where she has been teaching English language and communication skills for the last 5 years. She also taught temporarily at National Institute of Technology, Jamshedpur, and Sriram College of Commerce, Delhi University. She completed her PhD on Indian English poetry from ISM IIT Dhanbad. The areas of her research interests are Indian English literature, post-colonial studies, and English language teaching, among others. She has published short stories and poems in journals such as Muse India, Setu, and Kitab, apart from a book on communication skills and several research papers. So, a warm welcome to our speaker, Dr. Zindagi Kumari. Zindagi Di, welcome, and I think we'll now move on to your lecture. Over to you, Zindagi Di. You are Zindagi Di, you are mute. You'll have to unmute your speaker.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I was telling that there's not much to know about me, and let me not pretend to be an expert. And so whatever you said was all about me, and there is not. I mean, not much is left. I would rather address the students here as a learner, as a co-learner, and I do not think of myself as an expert on Indian drama or Girish Karnad as such. So let me not don't make me nervous by saying so much about me. Um, let me now start the talk, and I would share the PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared. Uh, I'm going to share the PowerPoint presentation with you all. Is it visible to you all? Is the PPT visible to the participants?
It's actually your, camera screen visible, Zindagi Di. Your PowerPoint is not visible. You will have to
Okay.
select your
Yeah, yeah.
PowerPoint.
I'll just do it. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yes, yes, yes. It is. It is. It is.
All right. So that's the title of my talk today. I have titled it as "Tonight May Be My Last Night," a reading of story in Girish Karnad's Nagamandal. Now, I would want to draw a little attention on the line "Tonight may be my last night," because the talk is commemorative. We are here to uh, this talk is being held in honor of Girish Karnad. We are here to remember him, to celebrate his legacy. And that is why, incidentally, I picked this line from the play Nagamandal itself. In the play, we have a playwright who, in the very beginning of the play, he is afraid of being dead because he has some curse on him. And he fears being dead. He says that tonight may be my last night. But towards the end of the play, we come to know that he's saved and he lives on and he's saved by a story. And this title also signifies the fact that the writers, the creators, the literators, they never die. They live on among us forever through their work, through their creations. With that, I would move on to talk about, to try to sum up the stature of Girish Karnad, his contributions and his achievements. So Karnad is a multi-skilled genius. He is also referred to popularly as a Renaissance man. He's a foremost Indian playwright, popular actor, director, translator, critic. He's an intellectual and cultural icon. We know of him from Malgudi days. We know of him from popular Bollywood movies like Ek Tha Tiger and Tiger Zinda Hai most recently. And he has worked in around 100 Bollywood movies. He has directed dozens of short and full-length movies. And, it is interesting to, in a way, see his educational journey. He did not intend to become a writer, a dramatist per se. He was pursuing his graduation in mathematics from College of Arts, Dharwad. And he also got a Rhodes Scholarship in the year 1960 and pursued his master's from Oxford University in economics philosophy. And there was one more subject, I guess it was anthropology. So then after that, Karnad returned to India. He worked for around 7 years with the Oxford University Press in Madras. And after that, he started writing play and performing them, staging them in theaters in Madras and other places. And then he also got Fulbright scholarship. He was given Fulbright scholarship as a writer in residence at University of Chicago, where he wrote this play Nagamandala that we are going to focus on in today's talk. When it comes to the literary awards and recognition, there is not many awards in Indian situation that has not been conferred upon Girish Karnad. Has been given Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Sahitya Akademi Award. He received in the year 1994. And he was also given Gyanpith Award in the year 1999. And all these awards are nothing if we compare them with the kind of aura he has. Now, the next mind map that I have prepared for the students, this will really be very helpful for the students in that it will give them a bird's eye view of the contributions of Girish Karnad. Karnad basically worked in the two major areas. He was a dramatist, and he was also very well known in the area of filmmaking. So far as his output as a dramatist is concerned, he's written around 15 plays, of which 10 of his plays he himself translated. Most of them he himself translated in English. And he wrote these plays in Kannada and translated them in English. Now, when it comes to his most popular plays, they are Tughlaq. His first play was Yayati, which he wrote in the year 1961 while he was in Oxford University. He was merely 23 years old. Imagine his precocity. He was a prodigy from the very beginning. And then his other popular and very acclaimed plays are The Fire and the Rain, The Dream of Tipu Sultan, Hayavardhana is also very popular. When we talk of his film career, he was an actor. He acted in the film that he himself has written the screenplay, Samskara, which came in the year 1970. This movie is available on YouTube, and if you want, you can watch this movie. And apart from that, because that's very easily available, he also worked in many Hindi movies, as I've already mentioned. And apart from that, he was, some critics said that he was a crown jewel of Kannada cinema, So that sums up his contribution to Kannada cinema. And, his contributions were such that he's been given so many Filmfare and other awards in the area of film. He's received around 10 national awards for various under various nominations: screenplay, screenwriting, direction and acting, supporting actor, and so on. So this sums up the persona, the stature, the tall figure of Girish Karnad. And now with the next slide, I would come to, I would like to highlight what made Girish Karnad so special. What was his uniqueness? What made him, what was so special about his play and his writing and his, creativity?
Sindhigiri, sorry to interrupt. Can you please put your PowerPoint presentation on full screen? It would be more visible to us.
All right, surely. I'll do that.
Thanks a lot.
Give me a minute, please. So I'm putting it in a slideshow mode. Okay. I'll have to move it a little bit. So we were on this slide. Is it visible? The full screen is visible?
Yes, it's good enough.
All right. So I was, talking about what makes Girish Karnad so special and what is so peculiar about his contributions and his creativity. The first thing that sets Girish Karnad apart is his use of myth, folklore, and history. In plays such as Yayati, Hayavardhana, and he uses episodes from Indian history and creates drama out of that. So that's the special feature of many of his plays. Other than that, he also uses myth and folklore. The specific example that we are going to talk about today, Nagamandal, demonstrates use of folklore. So we'll soon see how he uses folklore to write plays. Then some of the important themes that Girish Karnad focuses on in his work are family versus personal freedom. He stresses a lot on the conflict between individualism and common good. A couple of his plays also focused on the disappointment or disillusionment of the post-independent India. He also focuses in his plays on the issue of identity and female emancipation. The playwright is known to hold radical view on love, sex, marriage, and he also has presented critique of orthodox views. He is said to be extremely influenced by the philosophy of Jaddu Krishnamurti, and from there he developed not only from J. Krishnamurti, but also from his father, who was an atheist. Karnad developed this outlook of, criticizing and being cynical and skeptical to the orthodox views of social norms and social and cultural norms. Now coming to today's play, the text that we are, of course, drama is a performative art, and what we are doing here is we are talking about the text. We are talking about drama as a text. So that's a limitation perhaps of the talk. But then let's focus on Nagamandala as a text here. It is subtitled as Play with a Cobra. And I have tried to, in a way, give you some reflection on the theme, the broader theme that the play deals with through these pictures. Now, what we are going to focus on will be, firstly, we'll be looking at the story, because the story is the thread, that we have to hold in order to make other critical appreciation or, critical reflections on the play. So I'll talk about the structure of the play, which has 3 parts: prologue, act 1, act 2. It's a 2-act play with a prologue. And then a couple of slides about significance of prologue, story, and playwright. These are the 2 major elements in the prologue section of the play. Then parts of the presentation are related to story as a woman. And then some slides focus on characterization and how all the characters are symbolic. Then I talk about a very important motif that is used in the play, that is talk, chatter, giggle. And then towards the end, I talk about the many loose ends in the play. And I will end by talking about reception and adaptation of the play. So coming to the prologue of Nagamandal, I really found it very, very intriguing and interesting. Prologue is a part of a dramatic work which is considered separate and which is used if we refer to Elizabethan drama or classical European drama. Prologue was used to, it was normally a speech by a single character who would come on the stage and talk about what is going to happen, some background information, some context of the story that is going to be performed. So that used to be, in the European and Elizabethan context, the significance of prologue. But in Kernard's play, we find that prologue has been used, though it has been used to talk about the context, and it gives us the audience or the reader the background information. It has many characters, so it doesn't have one single character, but it has many characters, it has dialogue, and it looks similar to any other part of the play. So without much ado, let us talk about what is there in the prologue of the play Nagamandal. We see a cursed man sitting in a ruined temple. It's a godless temple. I assume that the temple is a theater. That's my interpretation. So he says that there is the direction note says that a man is sitting in a ruined godless temple, and he's very sad and he's very sleepy. This man seems to be awaiting his death, and he speaks to the audience. He says that I'm going to die because I have a curse on me. A certain mendicant cursed me that I will die if I'm not awake for one full night in a particular month. And this is the last night of that month. The playwright or the man, both these words are used for this character, playwright and the man. So this man is awaiting his death. He is under a curse and he has to stay awake for one full night. If he is not awake for this particular night, which is the last night, he will die. So that's his problem. That's his situation. Now what happens, and he's trying hard to keep awake. He's prying open his eyes and is trying to, force himself to keep awake. But something has happened and he's, falling asleep again and again. The next thing that happens is arrival of some flames. Some flames arrive on the scene. These flames are wickless. These flames are lampless. These flames are naked flames. No one is holding them, just the flames. These flames arrive giggling, chattering, gossiping, laughing. So when these flames arrive, the man who is the cursed man who is awaiting his death, he gets curious and he starts observing them. And these flames are talking about their respective households. And the man says that, okay, so that's this is truth that these flames gather at one isolated place every night and they talk about their own things. So he gets curious, and then the conversation of these flames are very interesting. These flames are talking about their respective household. One of these flames says that I came early today because I was chased away quickly, because in my household there was an ailing lady who died today, and the young couple who were in a way supposedly waiting for the old lady to die, they chased me fast. And then there is another lamp who talks about how the oil ran out, and then she was relieved. So all these flames have their own respective story. Then one flame mentions that the kerosene oil and the kusbi oil and the peanut oil, all the oils were finished because my owner of my household is a miser and he won't buy enough oil. And then the other one says that how disgusting is that? How can somebody use peanut oil? We in the West Coast side use only coconut oil. So we get very useful insight into the village life, into the morality and immorality of the village people, and we also get very useful insight into the socio-economic background in which the play is set. Now, what happens? All these flames suddenly start talking about a certain story and a song who is expected to arrive. And when this story and the song arrives, the story is very upset. She's upset. She's a woman. It is notable that the story has the form of a woman, and the song is a sari that this story has wrapped upon herself. So the story and the song arrive in the form of a woman and a sari, but the story is unhappy because she has a story that she wants to share with somebody. But flames are sure story that, okay, no problem, don't be unhappy. We will listen to your story, but we will not be able to pass it on to anyone. And on that, the story says that there is no use if you're not able to pass on my story to anyone. And there the man finds an opportunity for himself, because he has to stay awake the whole night. And if he listens to the story of the story, who is a woman, of course, a character, he has a chance to stay alive. Now, what happens? Varsha?
Yes, Indikiri.
Because I'm only able to see the screen. I'm not able to see any participants. So I just was checking whether everyone is there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
We are all engrossed.
All right. So what happens next is this man finds an opportunity, and the man goes and grabs the story, says that you tell your story to me. I'm ready to listen to it. Then story says that you promise me that you will pass it on to somebody. If you will share it with someone, then only I will tell it to you. Otherwise, I will not tell it to you. Then the man says that, he falls in a dilemma. Here we come to know about the curse that the man has. The curse is that the curse comes on him because he is a playwright and he has written and staged play, and he has made the audiences fall asleep in crooked chairs, and that is why he's cursed to stay awake for one full night. So here he's faced with the dilemma. He says that, okay, so if I listen to your story and if I have to share it with everyone, then I'll have to again, stage it and write it. So what should I do? I have just pledged and taken vow that I will stop writing plays. I will not have anything to do with writing and staging plays. So what do I do now? If I listen to your story, I live. If I do not share your story, I cheat you. I'm not loyal to you, and you will not agree to tell your story to me. So that's the complex situation that the man falls in. But then he eventually, agrees to listen to the story. So here we get an insight into the kind of I would say that the complex job or complex vocation of a writer, of the creative process, that, sometimes it so happens that you are not willing to share, but, there is some inner force that that compels you to share these stories and write these stories. So I think that's what that part of the prologue suggests. Now, here the prologue ends and the story starts telling a story to the man who is also a playwright. So the prologue ends here. And as story, gets ready to tell the story to the man, the playwright says, music. So he invites music. And then flames go in the background. They go in the background. They're watching the story, telling the story to the man from a distance. So here we come. This is the prologue of the play Nag Mandala. Now, what happens in Act 1 of the play? We come to the actual story that story shares with the playwright. This story is about a young woman, Rani. It's about a rich villager Apanna who marries Rani. Apanna is not a good husband. He's a neglectful person, and he has a mistress, and he doesn't treat his young wife well. He keeps her locked. And then what happens is, Rani is left very lonely, and she leads all the time she's kept locked inside a room and she keeps staring blankly outside. There's no one to talk to her. She doesn't have a friend. She often falls in delirium remembering her father and mother. She keeps dreaming of their love and how they loved her, and how she slept between her father and mother, and how they loved and pampered her, because her husband only comes to the house during lunchtime. Rest of the times he doesn't stay at home. He is staying with his mistress, a concubine in the village. Then we are introduced to another character, Kurudava, a blind village woman. She is quite sympathetic. She finds out that Rani is a young woman and she is neglected by Apanna. So she comes to Rani's rescue. She says that I will give you a magical root. If you grind it and if you mix it with the food and feed it to Apanna, he will instantly fall in love with you. This magical root I have applied on my own husband, and that's how he married me, because I was a blind woman. No one would marry me. So a mendicant gave me this magical root, and that's how I got a very successful married life. And I will I have 2 more pieces, and I will offer you one of those. And if you try it, and you will see how it works. So what happens? Rani takes that root. She mixes the root with the curry, but the curry changes its color. It becomes red, and Rani gets very scared. She's very uncertain about if she feeds this curry to her husband. Maybe something happens to him, to his health. So she gets very scared, and she goes outside her house and throws the entire food in which she has mixed the magical root on a huge anthill. This anthill is very important. So I would say it again and again. A huge anthill just outside her house. She throws the curry over the anthill, and a snake, a king cobra, who lives in that anthill, he drinks the curry with the magic root in it. The king cobra then starts following Rani, and he falls in love with Rani. That's where we come to the end of Act 1. In Act 2, King Cobra, which is referred to as Naga in the play, he can become, he can shapeshift, he can become a man. So he takes the form of Apanna and pays nightly visit to Rani. He becomes her lover, dilutes her loneliness, talk to her, he talks to her, talks about her parents, and is very, very affectionate, very, very loving to her. He in a way fulfills her loneliness and her emotional, sexual desire. So But look at Rani. She is baffled to experience those two facets of her husband. She says that during the daytime you become foul-mouthed, and during the nighttime you become such affectionate, person. So she is. It is very hard for her to grasp, these two facets of her husband. But Naga ties her with a promise. He says that you don't have to. During the daytime, you don't have to mention what happens during the nighttime. So she's happy with it, but she's also confused. So that's how the story moves on. Eventually, Rani becomes pregnant, and Apanna, her husband, discovers that she's pregnant, and he alleges her to be an adulteress, and he threatens her that she'll have to pass an ordeal in front of the entire village, and she'll have to prove her purity. A very difficult time for Rani. She is bewildered. She doesn't know how to react. Because during the night time when Naga comes, he says that he also conforms to the Apanna's demand that she'll have to undergo the ordeal. And he says that it has always been that, and you'll have to go through it. And but then he suggests that you choose snake ordeal. There are 2-3 ways of giving that test of purity. Naga suggests that you choose snake ordeal. You says that I will swear by the cobra in the anthill. So towards the end of the play, an ordeal takes place among the 3 village elders who act like jury. And Rani chooses snake ordeal. She says that she will swear by holding a snake in her hand that she is pure. And the last act, this part of Act 2 is very, very interesting. She goes in the anthill, the entire village gathers up. It's a huge spectacle. She plunges her hand inside the anthill, brings out the cobra and says that I have never, since I have come in this village, I have not touched anyone else except my husband and the Naga. So she's truthful. And what happens is that the Naga does not bite her. Otherwise, if she had lied, the Naga would have to bite her. So she's saved, and the Naga slides up on her shoulder and spreads his hood on her head, and the entire village hails her as a goddess. Everybody starts shouting that she's a miraculous woman, she's a goddess, and Apanna should worship her, rather than abusing her, beating her, scolding her, and leaving her by herself. He should rather worship her. So we have come to the end of Act 2. This is the storyline. This was very important for me to discuss. Otherwise, nothing would have made sense. I know that it's a bit lengthy, but let's move on to the next slide now. I'll skip this part, significance of prologue, and I'll talk about characters as symbols. The name Rani is very significant. Rani is a young woman, and she symbolizes, this name is generic. It establishes her as any young Indian woman who is married to, who is a part of this structure of arranged marriage. She is married to a certain man. The name of Apanna, it means any man. So it's a story of any man and any woman and marriage. It's a story of the plight that a woman undergoes in arranged marriage, if the husband does not treat her well. So that's what the character of Rani and Apanna symbolize. Rani symbolizes any woman, and Apanna symbolizes any man. Kurudava is a blind woman. She is a fellow woman who is also part of this, the entire patriarchal setup. She is very helpful and sympathetic to Rani, and she wants Rani to be happy and to settle, but then she does not defy the treatment that Apanna, subjects Rani to. Naga is the cobra. Naga can also be looked at as an alter ego of Aparna, because it can also be looked at, two facets of husband. How do they behave during the daytime and how do they behave during the nighttime? So, what I have thought of it, but it has been used. This play is developed out of the folk tale, the two oral tales, and the Naga element comes from there. The three village elders, they sit there to check or to test purity of a woman, Rani, who is always locked from outside. Aparna always keeps her locked. So they are there to test her loyalty. But Aparna, who, everybody knows that he keeps a mistress, he is never considered, as, disloyal. So that's the ironical situation that the play, highlights. Now, when story introduces Rani, she says that she's a young woman. Her name doesn't matter. So it's again, it signifies some of the ideas that we just mentioned, and then the point that Aparna is also symbolic. We know how Aparna treats Rani. He's callous, neglectful, and misbehaving. He always keeps her locked. So the sight of, on the stage also, if we look at the stage direction, there is a door where there is a lock, a lock always hanging, and the key is with Aparna. He always keeps the keys with himself and keeps the door locked from outside. So this can be looked at as a symbolic of how everything in the marriage is controlled by men in a patriarchal setup. The same ideas have been, mentioned here. I'll just take a minute and have a sip of water. All right. It is interesting to look at, other characters of the play. We know that Kurudava is a blind woman and she's very helpful. She comes for Rani's rescue and tries to help her with the mystical route, But then when her son Kapanna says that why Aparna keeps Rani locked all the time, Kurudava justifies his statement, this situation. She says that he keeps her locked because he doesn't want her to talk to anyone. And then when he says that, is Rani inside? Kurudava says that we are going to her precisely because she is inside, precisely because a woman is supposed to be inside the house. So, many such statements in the dialogue. The dialogue is also quite layered, and it's a very simple and the language is very simple, but it's very layered at the same time. Now, if we look at the character of Naga, Naga is very, very loving to Rani, and Naga fulfills all her desires, emotional vacuum and psychological, trauma that Rani faces. But, there is one thing that is very common between Naga and Aparna. Naga also does not allow her to question. He always assumes that Rani would understand his situation and his position. Now we come to the very important aspect of the play, what Karnad is doing here. He's, as I had mentioned briefly in the introduction part, this play is a woman-centric play. He is, the flames are also women. They are giggling, chattering women. Story has the form of a woman. She is wearing the sari of a song. In the stage direction, we find that they are talking animatedly. They are giggling, laughing, and languid hand gesture, animated faces. So what Karnad does he takes his inspiration from women folk, from folk tales based on women's life, their innermost desire, their anxieties, their loneliness. He tries to draw from these, and that is where we can say that he is trying to write plays, create literature, and create art form intended at liberating women. So not only Nagamandala, but in another play, Manishad, which was an which was a short radio play, was also based on a small episode from Ramayana. The episode of Sita's banishment from Ayodhya. So what Karnad does he is trying to question these choices, obviously, putting these situations in a very modern and contemporary context and existential he talks about these episodes, reinterpreting them in the context of modern life and how they highlight and give an insight to the life of the present women. I'm so sorry for I really have bad throat. I'll just take a minute. In Hayavardhana also, Karnad deals with a similar theme. He talks about desire and how they work, what desire mean for a woman. Now the motive of talk, chatter, giggle. At one place in the play, when Rani tries to talk to Aparna, Aparna says that, I don't like idle chatter. I don't like idle chatter. So he dismisses Rani. He does not allow her to talk to him. But what the playwright is creating a play wherein a lot of conversation, a lot of chattering, a lot of giggle and talks happen, and these are given significance. If we go back to prologue, what happens in the prologue? Flames are talking, and from their talk emerges story, and from the story emerges the play. So what Karnad does as an artist is he is giving significance to those elements which have been considered as nonsensical and insignificant. So if he wants to write a woman-centric play, he has to give value to what women love to do or what is normally associated with women. Now we've seen in the prologue that a story comes. She tells a story to the playwright who's waiting in a sanctum of a temple. So this element of story within a story in the play Nagamandala it has been it has come from the folklore. In the preface of the play, Karnad mentions that this play is based on two oral tales that he first heard from A.K. Ramanujan. A.K. Ramanujan is an eminent Indian English poet. So he also dedicates the play to Ramanujan and says that because he heard these two oral tales from him. And this element of story within a story is typical of oral folklores. Now, another important aspect is as I mentioned initially, that drama is a performative art, and we are discussing drama as a text here. This play has a lot of stage direction related to music. There is a song of flame in the play. And while I was researching, I was reading, I found that the song element is very prominent in the stage performances of Nagamandal. And in the beginning itself, when story arrives, she has song wrapped as a sari. So that also signifies that story and song go hand in hand. There is no story without song. So again, this element of a story full of song, or a story in sing-song form. Like I remember my grandmother telling me stories where parts of it would be song. So that is very typical of folklores. Now this is Song of Flame. I have just put it here. If we go through the lines of this song, we'll get some hints of some important motifs and symbols in the play. Come, let us dance through the weaver bird's nest and light the hanging lamp of glowworms, through the caverns in the anthill and set the diamond in the cobra's crown ablaze, through the blind woman's dream, through the deaf mute's song. Come, let's flow down the tresses of time. Now, coming to the end, I will talk about the end of the play. The play ends where the ordeal of Rani ends. You know, she is considered as a goddess, and Apanna is commanded to worship her and to abide by what she says. But then what happens, you know, the playwright, the man who is listening to the story, he has many questions in his mind, and he says, this cannot be the end of the story. What happens to Apanna? Apanna cannot accept Rani just like that, because some village elders said that you have to now consider her as a goddess. You know, so far he's been considering Rani as a slave. You know, she was reduced to the kitchen, and the only thing that Apanna wanted from her was rice and lunch. So now all of a sudden, how can Apanna accept her as a goddess? So that's the question that troubles the man who is a listener, who is also a playwright. And then she says that, and how can Rani not realize that, you know, Naga was a different person, and you know, at night it was Naga and during the daytime it was Apanna. How can a woman not realize while she lives with two different men? So these are the questions that plague the listener's mind, and he says that it cannot be so. You cannot just close the story by saying that they happily lived ever after. You know, happily ever after. So then Rani says that. Sorry, I'm so sorry. The story says that, okay, when somebody says that happily ever after, that does not mean that that doesn't have to be taken literally. It has to be taken as everybody accepts the other person with a pinch of salt. You know, of course, Rani knew that Naga was different and Apanna is different, but then now it's something like that you agree to live with a snoring husband and a balding wife. So story says that, you know, it doesn't mean that everything is perfect. You know, things are imperfect, but then everybody accepts to go on with imperfection. And then story adds another beat to the tale. She extends it a little bit, and wherein the Naga comes to visit Rani, and he reduces his size as the size of Rani's hair, and he gets inside her hair, makes love to her hair, and then he commits suicide. He prepares a noose of the hair of the Rani, and he commits suicide in her hair. When his dead body falls from her hair, Rani, you know, holds him very close to her cheek, and she cries, and she requests Apanna that Naga has to be cremated with the honor of the son, the father of her son. You know, of course, Rani gives birth to a beautiful son. So she requests Apanna that Naga has to be given the honor of the father of her son, because it was because of him that his son is alive, and he's in a way saved her son. So that she gives that explanation, and Apanna agrees. So this is the end of the story where Naga dies. But this is not the end of the play. The play goes on. Story leaves. The man or the listener stays there, and he keeps thinking. The flames are very upset about the tragic end. So the dramatist, what does he do? He makes it into a comedy and a happy ending, wherein Naga stays alive, you know, and he's always inside the hair of Rani. And, you know, Rani keeps him tied as her wedding bliss. That's the term used in the play, wedding bliss. So she keeps Naga tied in her hair all the time. So and she's like, are you comfortable there? Let me get used to you. So these expressions are very, very symbolic. So that end the listener assigns to the story. So there are many loose ends to the story, extensions and reinterpretation of the story. And I've already explained this point, that playwright, the listener, turns the tragic end into comic end. Now, I'll talk about retellings, reception, and adaptation of Nagamandala. I was trying to look up on the internet, about. I was trying to, when I was reading this play, and I explored how the play has been received. And within half an hour of search, I found details of around 20 performances across India, different cities, Bangalore, Delhi, Ludhiana, and not only in India, but in many Singapore, America, and many other countries. This play has been enacted and performed by amateurs and professionals alike. Students love to perform these play, and it has been staged in a number of universities. So Nagamandala has really been received very well. It's a very acclaimed play of Girish Karnad. And as you can see here, from February 2007 to November 2018, there has been around 20 performances. I could found out about 20 performances, and there could have been many more. And across countries and continents, across languages, in Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam, Punjabi, English, of course. So there is no bar of language, or there is no time. So the play is timeless. It has appealed to all kinds of audience across different places and different culture and social background. So far as adaptations, there was a movie Paheli by Amol Palekar. The storyline is very similar to Nagamandala, but there we do not have the character of Naga. In the place of a Naga, we have a crow in that movie, and crow takes the form of the absent husband, and comes to the lonely wife. So also there is the movie titled Videsh, and it is a Canadian movie, and it was in its Canadian name is Heaven on Earth. It starred Preeti Zinta. I have seen this movie, and I was very happy when I got to know that I have to speak on Nagamandala. I did not know that the story will match to this movie, but then when I read, I could relate the story, both the stories. It is intriguing, however, that I read several reviews of this movie, and none of those reviews mentioned any connection to the play and between the play and the movie. So I do not know whether that was deliberate or that was due to ignorance of the reviewers. But this is how we find influence of Nagamandala in stage performances, in how it has been received, and how it has been there in the area of cinema, so far as adaptations are concerned. Now, my last words, again, I have picked it from the play itself. I hadn't realized my plays had that much impact, though this statement is made very, very ironically in the prologue of Nagamandala. It applies perfectly to the impact that Girish Karnad's play create on the audience. No deny. I mean, it's quite obvious that since we've talked so much that the appeal is timeless, it's timeless because his plays are rooted in indigenous experiences and they are informed alike by modern and classical stage techniques. There are many research papers on how Nagamandala and other plays of Girish Karnad are influenced by techniques of Bertolt Brecht, the very famous dramatist, and how his dramatic technique is also influenced by the classical Indian drama. There is studies about rasa in Girish Karnad's plays, influence of Parsi theatre in Girish Karnad's play. So all those research papers are there, and I would want the students to kindly explore those papers if they're interested in learning or knowing more about Girish Karnad and his dramatic technique. His plays are of great topical value and universal appeal. They are valuable repository of Kannada and Indian English literature, specifically drama. Also, we must underline his contribution to films, acting, screenwriting, direction, which is immense and unforgettable. I would close by an observation made by a very famous Kannada critic, Kritinath Kurtakoti. He says that the more we watch Tughlaq, the more we discover its multiple layers and its striking relevance to contemporary India. This observation is made about Tughlaq, but I assure you, if you read Nagamandala, you will find that this statement applies verbatim to Nagamandala as well. The more you read it, the more you discover its multiple layers. Also, I have another quote, which I've taken from an article from the newspaper, the Straits Times, which is a newspaper from Singapore. The journalist writes about a performance of Nagamandala. He says, in its 90 minutes, it contains every element of theatre one might desire: comedy, tragedy, drama, romance and mystery, plus live music and visual spectacle to thrill the senses. So that's how I sum up Karnad's personality, his contribution to Indian drama, and that's how I would love to remember him. Thank you so much. Varsha?
Thanks a lot, Zindagi. It was really detailed. And the most important thing which you kept in mind is that you understood that this lecture was focused on the UG students who just had got to read this text and they were facing a lot of difficulties. So I'm very, very glad that you understood your target audience and you created this amazing, presentation for them. I think they would be understanding, they would be able to understand the play in a much, much, much better way now that they have heard you. So thanks a lot for this beautiful presentation. Now I would request my students to, if they have any questions, they can certainly ask. Any questions coming up? I think we have some questions in the comment section, chat section already. Some questions. Students, please drop your questions.
Okay, there is a student who is asking who was beautiful and good-natured, Rani or his mistress. So we do not have any detail of...
I believe that's not a student. He is Dr. Shishu Paul from Government Degree College, Shahpur, Kangra, Himachal Pradesh. Yes.
All right, I'm so sorry.
Yes,
yeah, so sir, I mean, in the play, I did not find any reference to the mistress. She's only mentioned when Apanna is, when there is mention of Apanna and his mistreatment to Rani. So we do not actually get to see his mistress. Towards the end, of course, when Rani's ordeal ends, we get to know that the mistress becomes servant to Rani. So these are the two very minor details that we get about mistress in the play. So I would not be able to judge who was more good-natured, Rani or his mistress. But your question, if I look at it from a deeper perspective, if I, find meaning, more meaning in the question, and at a different level, if I take this question, if you underline the Rani being in the setup of a patriarchal marriage, arranged marriage, and then meeting another man, in that sense, and mistress openly, being that kind of a woman, it's really very difficult to judge, and I won't be able to pass any judgments on it, because that's the beauty of the play, and I would rather let the reader and the viewers and the audience judge by themselves. And good natured, what is good natured? I do not even know the definition of being good natured, so I won't be able to apply it to the characters in the play. It's very subjective and situational, as far as I understand. Also, if I look at some other questions, where the flames have gone in the end, where the flames have gone in the end. Um, mm, Towards the till the end of the play, flames stay there. They go to their own to their respective households. During the night time, when they are put out, they gather at an isolated place. But when the day breaks, they again go back to their respective households. In the old, when there was no electricity, I remember when I was small, in my villages, we'll have debris, and those will be burnt when there was evening and dusk time. So these flames are put out when everybody sleeps, and then they gather at one isolated place, and then they go back to their own houses. So I assume that after the story ends, they go back to their own respect. In fact, they mention that, finish it fast, we have to go, it is going to be morning soon. So you make they are requesting the playwright to make the end into a comic, a happy ending, but then they are also asking him to hurry up, because they have to leave. So they'll go back to the households from where they have arrived. And we have a question by Ghanishta. She says, "Ma'am, why society cannot accept women as humans? Why is it so that a woman needs to have characteristics of goddess to be accepted in society?" So, yeah, again, we come back to the same question. A woman falls in the two, in the typical patriarchal society. Women has been given these two extreme positions of, either a monster, a witch, or a goddess. So there is no middle ground for a woman. She cannot be accepted as a mixture of good and bad, as a human. So that's unfortunate, and I think that a lot of it is changing with time, the way the time is changing, and a lot of it is yet to change. So that's because of, the conventional thinking, the orthodox thinking about women, and how women have been portrayed, throughout history and in mythology. Girish Karnad also is critiques myths, because they have been strengthening the stereotypes of women. So I hope that I've been able to some extent, answer your question. Somebody asks, did justice happen to the queen? Did justice happen to the queen? No, you yourself analyze the situation. Did justice happen to the queen? No. She passes the snake ordeal, and she is accepted as a goddess. So it might not be, she might not be 100% happy, satisfied with the outcome of the ordeal, but then certainly she is alive, she is left alive, she is left to live with her husband, and her husband also accepts her and treats her well. So I think that we can consider it to be a favorable situation for Rani, because Rani has always wanted to, she was always craving for the love and attention of her husband. So we assume that after, she's made into a goddess and she's declared to be a goddess, and when Apanna becomes servile to her, he will listen to her, and maybe he will treat her well. Nobody knows what happens after the story ends. Ironically, the narrator says that happily ever after. I mean, there is a lot of layers are there, in the expression happily ever after. So nobody exactly knows, but you just put an end to everything by this statement. Varsha, do I have any more questions? Varsha?
Yes, Zindagi, I don't think we have any other questions. Students, any more questions?
There is still one question in the chat box by some Shrishti Singh. What does the
We'll see to that.
All right, let me. I think that I'm not able to scroll downwards. Let me do it again.
What, Shrishti, I'll read it out, Zindagi. What does the suicide of Naga symbolize? What does the suicide of the Naga symbolize?
Okay. What does it symbolize? While the Naga is there, he goes to visit Rani. He says that it's a familiar path and familiar hour. And he decides to, he says that now she has, he is introspecting. He says that, after all, I am an animal, I'm a Naga. I cannot have my skin for one full year. How can I always have the form of a human? So he gets very self-contemplative and introspective, and he realizes that he cannot match a human. And now that Rani gets what she always wanted, she wanted her husband to be treating her well. So he doesn't find any scope for himself, and that's where he commits suicide. Also, towards the end of the story, when Rani is in dilemma and she wants Naga. Naga has never disclosed his identity to Rani. He has never said that he is a Naga and he is not Apanna. It is up to Rani to realize that it is not her husband but somebody else. So since Naga has not disclosed his real identity, how can he expect that Rani will accept him if he now explains what is his real identity? So I think that there is no scope for Naga anymore after Apanna changes and Rani is declared as a goddess, and the entire household is at least shown as a perfect setup for Rani, with a servant, with a nice husband, with a son. So that is why perhaps Naga commits suicide, because he doesn't have any space left to be with Rani.
We have a few more questions. One is by Manpreet Roka.
Okay.
Manpreet, so if Naga is personified.
Yeah. So if Naga is personified and it carries the two facets of a man, which facet of it is sacrificed earlier and why? It carries the two facets of a man. Which facets of it is sacrificed earlier and why? Now the traits that Naga symbolizes, he is treating her well, respectful, and listening to her. If Aparna is able to do that, if Aparna is able to, her husband, if he is able to do that, if he incorporates all the traits that Naga has, Naga doesn't have any use left, So rather than behaving like two different people, if some self-examination takes place and people realize and course correct, then there is no conflict. I think that is what is implied in the play. And it's a very complex symbolism, and it can be interpreted in so many different ways. I think that the Naga was a symbol of the desire of Rani and fulfillment of her desire. So in a way, it can also be treated as at the altar of a perfect marriage, desire of a woman is sacrificed. So we can interpret it that way as well.
Okay, so Zindagi, you are free to decide whether you want to take up more questions or not, because you have been speaking since 4 o'clock and it's 5:20 already. So
no,
it's absolutely yours.
Varsha, could you read out the other questions down? Because I'm
Yes,
somehow
sure.
not able to read out the questions.
Because you are still presenting, your screen is still being shared. That's it.
Okay, so shall I, if I close it, will I be able to see the questions?
Yes.
Okay, let me then do it. Okay, so I stopped presenting. Now I'll take the questions. All right, so ma'am, can we say that death of Naga symbolizes death of Rani's dreams and desire? Because yes, exactly, that's what I said, Ganeshta, that it symbolizes death of Rani's dreams and it symbolizes death of her desire and expression of her desire. So to have to live a life with a man and with a child and with a happy family in the eyes of society, many a times women have and women do sacrifice their desires. So that's the symbol. That's how we can read the symbolism of Naga here. Varsha, I don't think I have any more questions left after this.
Ma'am, there's a question I had put.
Could you read it out, dear student, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can ask the questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, as Kurudwa was blind and she was the one who had given the mystical route to Rani, so does she not represent how people stay blind to the superstitions as well?
Yeah, certainly. That's a very important point that I did not talk about in my presentation. Of course, Nagamandala is about superstitions also, because it is based on folklores. It's based on oral tales. Those tales had a lot of element of superstition, and Girish Karnad is also known as a modernist, as a Renaissance dramatist who critiqued superstition, who critiqued the conventional and orthodox viewpoint. So in his drama, he's also doing that. Along with other things, he's also trying to highlight how the real problems are being tackled with these superstitious belief, and that is why these problems never reach a proper solution.
Thank you, ma'am.
Other question, you may ask your questions.
Swarnim, please unmute and ask.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, actually you mentioned two movies. One is Paheli and the other one?
Other one is Heaven on Earth.
Okay.
the Hindi name of the movie is Videsh.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Both these movies you will find on the internet. They are available. You can watch these movies and you can see the striking similarity between the plot of the play and the movie.
I have watched Paheli, but I haven't heard of that Videsh.
This movie has
Okay.
not been received very well. It was, though it was critically acclaimed, it was not a commercial success. So
Okay.
that is why perhaps you might not have come across it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Anamika. Any other questions? Any other questions? You can quickly unmute yourself and ask. I don't think there are any other questions.
Good
Okay,
evening.
Ganeshta, you have another question?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening,
Ma'am,
Ganeshta.
good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, Kudwa's son presents a different kind of maid who questions why Rani is being treated like this, the way she is treated by her husband. Ma'am, does it not present that how in a society both good and bad characters dwell together?
Yes, it does. It certainly does. It certainly does. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Thanks for your opinion, Ganeshta. Any other questions? We
Also,
also have
you know,
Rita with us.
the son of Kuruduva, Kapanna, you know, he towards the end of the play, we come to know that he has disappeared, and Kuruduva is looking after him, you know, desperately. She's trying to find him, and towards the end of the story, we do not know whether she is able to find her son or not. And when the playwright asks story that what happens to Kuruduva, what happens to her son, the story says that that's Kuruduva's story. That is not Rani's story. I am telling you the story of Rani. So you do not expect me to elaborate on that. So that's how, story, the narrator reacts. But then Kuruduva, you know, often sees witches and monsters and ghosts, and they are always in the form of women. You know, I was watching one performance of the play, and I could see that Kapanna, Kuruduva's son, he always visualizes these women, and Kuruduva also has this assumption that something has been done by these witches to his son, and that is why he has disappeared and she's not able to find him. But we do not know much about that part. Of course, we can interpret that, and we can study that part as well.
Ma'am, can we say that society always ignores a man who have liberal views, who thinks that a man and woman should have equal rights? And maybe because of this reason only Kapanna is towards the end he is missing. We don't know what happens to him.
Exactly. That's a very intelligent observation, and I must really congratulate you that you noticed it. I did not, unfortunately, focus on that part, but yes, I totally second what you say. That certainly seems to have happened. That, you know, he is the only person who is talking about why Rani is locked, why she is not allowed to talk to anyone. And he is the only person, who is interested in Rani and who is sympathetic to Rani, only outsider, who has eyes. Kuruduva doesn't have eyes. Kuruduva is also affectionate and, she has sympathy to Rani, but she doesn't have eyes. So Kapanna has eyes and he is concerned about Rani. So he can certainly be a representative of sane, liberal human who is ignored.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, may we also interpret blindness of Kuruduva as women know that knows this, that what's happening to them is wrong, but they are not free to act. They do not have that right to speak up that no, you are doing wrong. Means they are somehow chained by the rules of society?
Yes, yeah. No, so yeah, it can be that that they Kuruduva undergoes an experience which is very similar to Rani. Why she knows everything about Rani. She knows that she will be in her house and she needs this magical route. How come she knows Rani's experiences? Because she identifies with Rani. She has herself undergone all those things. But then she chooses to ignore these things and she conforms to the predominant, norms of the society. So, and many a times when Kapanna asks her that, this is what is, when Kapanna, who has eyes, her son, when he explains some situation to Kurudava, she ignores him completely. She says that you are mad, you do not know anything. No, so that's her reaction to her son's observation. So certainly she seems to be choosing to ignore things, and she's more striving to fit into the given norms. And that is why towards the end, she's like she has lost her sanity. So that's how she's represented. Also, here I would like to add that when the playwright asks Story that what happens to Kurudava, Story says that you find out about Kurudava on your own. She might be among the audience, she might be among the village, she might be in the marketplace, in the village, or you may invent what happens to her. So that's what Story suggests about the missing detail related to Kurudava.
So,
One last
Dhanishta,
question.
I think that's quite enough. As many stories, as many readings, as many interpretations. We
Exactly.
can't stop them.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much, Zindagidi, for joining us, for making this session a very successful one. And I want to mention this very importantly that for a brief moment, our principal, Sir Professor P. Shekhar, also joined the session.
Okay.
Because you were taking up the session, I could not, I did not want to disturb you. So he joined for a brief moment, and I'm very happy for that because he himself is an expert of literature.
Wow.
He has been a scholar of literature all his life, and he is our principal as well.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
Yes. So, Zindagiri, thank you very much for this beautiful.
It was absolutely
detailed-
my pleasure, Varsha. It was an opportunity for me because, honestly, I do not get to talk to literature students very often. So I was really looking forward to it, and I wrote you several times how thrilled and how excited I am. So thank you so much. Yeah.
So, thanks a lot. Our students have been thrilled too about this session, and I think that they have received a
I
lot
hope
of
that
things
I
today.
because I read this play for the first time, for this talk itself. So I was slightly, I was not 100% sure. And you might have observed that I have not done it critically. I've done it, textually.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
I
But
am glad that you understood the need of our students and you managed it accordingly. I'm very, very thankful towards you for that. Thanks a lot. And
you're
we'll be
welcome.
continuing to invite you for more such sessions
That would be
because
my pleasure.
because
I'm very happy, and I'm very happy with the questions of the students. They really, they are in a way, they have charged me to think further, to think more, to think beyond.
thank you so much.
Okay.
So with this, we call it a day. Thank you very much,
Yes.
everybody, for joining in.
Thank
Uh,
you all students. Thank you, Varsha.
Thanks a
Have a
lot,
nice
Cindy.
time. Have a nice day.
Thank you, thank you. And before you leave, I would request you to please check out the chat section if students have left some, messages for you and everything, and then,
Surely.
and then you can leave. Thank you so much, everybody. With this, we call this a day. Take care.
Nice messages. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.